In this next section, I want to talk to you about the reasons why people smoke. What are your reasons for smoking? A lot of smokers will answer that question by saying they smoke because they choose to smoke. But this is actually one of those myths that I want to dispel during the course of this programme. Sure, we probably do choose to smoke that first cigarette, but at what point did you ever choose to become a smoker for life? Do you remember that first puff of a cigarette? For the first time in your life, let's just imagine you lit a cigarette. You didn't know any better. You sucked the smoke straight down into your lungs, didn't you? Because that's how you've seen people doing it. 3,000 toxins swirling around your lungs. Mother Nature's design of your body is throwing a Mickey fit. It really is. What are you suffering? Nausea. You know, when you ever put a toxin in your body, it makes you feel nauseous. Some people tell me, not many, but some people tell me they're physically vomiting at their first cigarette. They actually vomit. It didn't happen with me, but I did feel a bit sick. Yeah. What else happens?
Coffee.
Exactly. You know, the lungs trying to get rid of these foul toxins. Absolutely revolting. What else? One other thing I think physically that happens. Lightheaded, woo! What smokers later refer to as the nicotine buzz, but it's nothing to do with the nicotine. Do you know what it is to do with? Yeah, lack of oxygen to the brain. What happens is this, one of the main ingredients in cigarette smoke is something called carbon monoxide. You know, that's the gas that comes out of car exhaust pipes. Carbon monoxide is very easily absorbed by the red blood cells, the hemoglobin in the body, and it displaces the oxygen. So that very first puff, you're basically depriving the brain of oxygen. You're choking yourself. Literally, any doctor will tell you that's suffocation. And we experience this light-headed feeling and a hit in the lungs. Is this making sense? Now, I didn't want to put it down and look foolish, because part of the reasons I wanted to be rebellious, I wanted to be part of the gang, my older friends, you know, Eddie and Andy, you know, great. So what I did is I smoked the rest of the cigarette like this. Like this. And Eddie and Andy were laughing, saying, "No, look at Groves, he's not inhaling." I said, "Yes, I am." Do you remember doing that? You did do it. Honestly, I wasn't, you know, I didn't know you then, but I can guarantee you spent the next 2 or 3 weeks smoking one a day, trying to teach yourself to inhale. And everybody's saying, "You're not inhaling." And we tried so desperately to teach ourselves. Do you remember that? So after 2 or 3 weeks, Eddie Marshall, handed me a cigarette and said, "Darling Grovesy." I smoked it and I could actually inhale it. I suddenly thought, oh, I'm actually starting to enjoy these things. See, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was looking at Eddie and Andy thinking, well, they're obviously enjoying it, but I hate these damn things. They're horrible. I could never get hooked because I hate them. Andy and Eddie seem to love them, but not me. I'm never going to be a smoker. Can you relate this to yourself? Good. A few people nodding. Good. So by that time, it's too late. I'm already hooked on nicotine. Do you understand? After 3 weeks of putting these doses of nicotine into my body, because even when I wasn't inhaling, it's being absorbed through the mouth and the tongue and all the rest of it. I'm already hooked. So Mother Nature's warning bell goes off at this stage, slightly, but it's already too late. I'm already hooked. Okay? I chose to light the first cigarette. I didn't choose to carry on smoking, but by this time, it's too late. You know, what ends up doing with every smoker, it's how the trap works. We all choose to smoke that first cigarette, but how many of us actually chose to become a smoker for life? Are we saying that we enjoy all the cigarettes we smoke? Most smokers will admit that they only enjoy certain cigarettes of the day, in which case why don't they just smoke those cigarettes, the ones they enjoy? Smokers don't smoke because they choose to smoke any more than heroin addicts take heroin because they choose to take heroin. When does a heroin addict choose to become an addict? When does an alcoholic choose to become an alcoholic? At what point did you choose to become a smoker for life? You didn't choose to become a smoker for life, you just got lured into a trap by the nicotine, by the cigarettes themselves. A lot of smokers know they're addicted without me having to tell them, but even though they know on some level that they're addicted to nicotine, they still believe that there's some pleasure or crutch that they actually get from their smoking. I want you to understand that actually there is only one reason why any smoker lights any cigarette, and that is addiction. But nevertheless, many smokers believe they actually enjoy smoking. So what are those so-called pleasures and enjoyment that we get from cigarettes? Let's take a look at some of the things that smokers tell me. Well, a smoker gets a packet of cigarettes, they open the packet, and some people say they actually enjoy the smell of the tobacco. Well, I'm smelling these now, and I must admit they do smell quite nice, but it doesn't make me want to smoke one. And what about the smell when you light a cigarette and the smoke starts curling up into your face? Do you like that smell? Some of my clients tell me actually they do quite like the smell of smoke from their cigarettes. But what about the morning after at a party? Do you enjoy the smell of a dirty ashtray? Well, most smokers would probably agree that they don't like the smell of that. What is your favourite smell on the planet? A lot of my smokers tell me they love the smell of flowers, of roses. But you don't go out into a garden or a park, take the petals off a rose and roll them up in a paper tube and set light to them and breathe the fumes into your lungs. Get this clearly in your mind. If you were smoking because you like the smell, then you'd have no reason to smoke at all. Just find a friend who's prepared to smoke and follow them around for the rest of your life. It's not the true reason you smoke. A lot of my clients will tell me, okay, it's not so much the smell, it's the taste. When they light the cigarette and they breathe the fumes into their mouth, the first thing is it hits the taste buds on the tongue. You love the taste of cigarettes, I say. Well, what's your favourite taste on the planet? My favourite taste on the planet is actually mangoes. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I happen to like the taste of mangoes, a nicely fresh mango, especially if somebody else has prepared it for me. I love mango. But if I went to the doctor and said, listen, doc, I'm getting all these symptoms, I don't know what's causing them. I'm getting short of breath, I'm wheezing, I'm coughing, I'm feeling lethargic. I had a dead arm in bed last night and these terrible cramps in my calf muscles. Any idea what could be causing that? If the doctor turned around and said, well, that's classic symptoms of somebody that eats too many mangoes, I'd never eaten a mango in my life again. I never got to the stage with mangoes where before I went out for the evening, I had to hide 20 mangoes about my body in case I ran out of mango, getting into a panic if I couldn't have one. You're laughing, but can you see the serious point? There's a big difference between liking the taste of something and getting in a panic if you can't have it. I want you to get this clearly in your mind. It's not the real reason you smoke. You don't smoke because you like the taste of cigarettes. In fact, if you think back to when you first started smoking, you probably hated the taste of them. You had to go through a foul learning process to teach yourself to get used to the foul taste and smell of cigarettes. Like me, you probably stick to one or two brands. If I took a cigarette off a friend who smoked a different brand, I would find the taste of his or her cigarettes terrible because I hadn't taught myself to get used to the particular cocktail of poisons in that different brand. And that's why smokers stick to one or maybe two brands, because they teach themselves to get used to the foul taste and smell. I've been very lucky in my career actually. So I've seen a lot of different cultures. Doesn't matter how many countries I go to, I've never actually seen a smoker smoking like this. Okay, smoking 2 cigarettes at once. Have you ever seen that? No. Then why is it, do you think? Somebody's making a comment. I do remember once my phone ringing in my office back in the day when you could smoke in your office. I remember my phone ringing. I already had a cigarette in the ashtray that I'd forgotten about, smoking unconsciously as you do. The phone rang, that was one of my signals to light a cigarette, and I found myself at 2 at once, but I immediately put one out, We don't tend to smoke 2 cigarettes at once, but nevertheless, smokers all over the world will tell you, if you say, why do you smoke? They say, it gives me something to do with my hands, plural, okay? Hands? It gives you something to do with your hands? What, you're smoking 2 cigarettes at once? I don't think so. Maybe what you're doing is this, swapping the cigarette from hand to hand in case one of the hands starts to feel a little bit left out or something. I want to join in the fun, Listen, I'm doing something with both my hands right now, okay? Now, I'm not insulting your intelligence, but let me ask you, what do you notice about both these cigarettes? They're not lit. Fantastic. So why like them? If it's something to do with your hands, why like them? Because the reason it's in your hand is because we want to put it in our mouth to get the nicotine. That's why. Some of my clients also say to me that they like the hand-to-mouth action. It gives them something to do. Now, if you look at me now, what is so great about this hand-to-mouth action? What is so special about it? I'm doing it now, but I'm not a smoker and I haven't smoked for many years. In fact, my question is, why light it? If you're genuinely smoking because it gives you something to do with your hands or because you enjoy the hand-to-mouth action, then why indeed light it at all? In fact, it's better just to replace the cigarette once the filter gets wet. Now, I bring the mouth into it. I have to tell you that I studied psychology at university. And one of the things I remember was the teachings of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. He said that all the neuroses that we suffer as adults, and of course nicotine addiction might be considered one of them, all those neuroses actually arise from problems we had at certain stages of development in childhood. And you may have heard some smokers say that the reason they smoke is because they have an oral fixation, that this is somehow a substitute for the mother's breast. Freud taught that children go through several stages of development as infants, the first of which is the oral stage of development, where the baby is weaned on the mother's breast. And the idea that some smokers have is that they had suckling difficulties as a baby and therefore developed an oral fixation, and that the cigarette is some sort of substitute for the mother's breast. Now, interestingly, the next stage of development that Freud suggested was the anal stage of development, where children learn bowel control and are potty trained. And my question to smokers that think they smoke because of an oral fixation, people that have problems at the anal stage of development, I wonder where they put their cigarettes. I love the nicotine hit I get first thing in the morning. Really wakes me up and gets me going. That's why I smoke. It's not nicotine, is it? Do you remember we talked about this earlier? It's carbon monoxide. Mother Nature's warning bells go off. The lungs are warning you, saying, lack of oxygen, signal to brain, lack of oxygen, sort it out. Actually, yeah, it's a stress reaction. Adrenaline rises, heart starts pumping, blood pressure rises, breathing increases. It's not pleasurable. Do any of you enjoy that feeling, the nicotine hit? Some people say they do. But it's not nicotine hit, it's you're suffocating yourself. Great tip. If any of you do like that feeling, what I suggest you do is this. Invest in a plastic carrier bag. Put that over your head from time to time. Just remember to take it off because it can be dangerous for your health, okay? If you go out late at night to a party and you suddenly start smoking a lot more, particularly if there's alcohol involved where you just lose any willpower and discipline over the amount you smoke, you'll find yourself chain smoking. The body's not used to all this huge amount of carbon monoxide coming in. The lungs can deal with it because you do it gradually over the course of an evening. But it's the brain that's the part that gets a bit, we call it a nicotine buzz sometimes. Woo, getting a nicotine buzz, I've smoked too much. Again, do you understand? It's not the nicotine, it's the suffocation. It's just that it's the brain, it's the organ that's now deprived of the oxygen. Again, the carrier bag trick will work for that as well, One other thing that I'm sometimes told about cigarettes by certain clients of mine are that it makes them feel cool, it makes them feel big, it makes them feel rebellious. Now you can probably guess what type of smoker, demographically speaking, would that be. It's in fact the youngsters, and probably you and I both started smoking for the same reason, that it made us feel big, cool and even rebellious. But that side of the equation soon goes, because once we get hooked on cigarettes, there's nothing rebellious or cool about being dictated to, about being controlled by that little voice in our heads that we were talking about earlier, nicotine addiction. The moment they start to try to quit and realise just how difficult it can be, that's the moment it ceases to be cool and rebellious, because they then realise that they've been caught in the smoking trap. Can you see that for what it is? It's just a nicotine delivery system. All this nonsense about enjoying taste, smell, hand to mouth. I've had a good laugh because actually, if we're adult about it, it's really ridiculous, isn't it? It's obvious why we're smoking, to get the nicotine into our body. In the next section, we're going to be looking at the dependency and where it comes from and what the nature of that dependency is. I'll be explaining what nicotine itself is, and I'll be talking about the psychological aspects of nicotine dependency. Nicotine is the most pathetic drug in the world, really, because there's not even the general high. I mean, most drugs, there's two components, isn't there? You get the high, followed by the crash, the low. With nicotine, there is no high, it's just the crash. How the hell did we get addicted? It's incredible, it's so clever.